Let's watch a recent News Nation segment featuring Adam Mockler talking with a former Democrat turned Trump supporter over Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, this election, why Republicans won, this sort of thing that I thought would allow for us to further discuss with some context. So I've lined what I consider the best of these clips up and we'll knock them out one by one.
I think that Kamala Harris wasn't really addressing the economic needs of people in this country. We've seen inflation at an all-time high. She did present some economic ideas like implementing small business loans and stuff like that. But Donald Trump was out there every single day talking directly to the voters, giving real policy proposals like no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, things that would infuse a real change directly into their lives right now. And so I think he ran on a campaign of economic populism and she did not. And that's ultimately the main reason why the Democrats did not win this election. I think
this idea that Republicans try to push anytime they win any election that, oh, well, America accepted our policies and we got a mandate. And it's just kind of tired, especially considering they would never grant that to Democrats ever. But even more so when we know that people largely just kind of vote off vibes, right? Like Kamala undoubtedly, indisputably, was the only candidate actually rolling out policies. I don't think you could, in good faith, say that she wasn't, and Trump was. She wanted to expand the earned income tax credit, expand the child tax credit, do so, fund it through like an unrealized tax on capital gains, expanding or raising the corporate tax rate. She wanted to implement tax deductions for small business owners, FTC penalties for price gouging, tax assistance for buying a home, expanding Medicare to include in-home care, lowering medicine costs, continuing the Biden historic student loan debt forgiveness, things that could actually relieve economic strains that actual everyday people experience. Everyday people actually go to school and feel these strains. They actually are working every day and could use more of their earned income back on tax credits. They actually are starting families, these kinds of things. While Trump ran on literally nothing but lies and promises he probably wouldn't keep. And then things like his talking points of like, no tip or no taxes on tips. Most tipped workers don't pass the threshold to be taxed anyway. This is a misnomer. It's again just a talking point that sounds better than it actually is in implementation. No tax on overtime leads those who are able to work more, like, those who don't have children, to have their effective tax rate decrease. This further makes our tax structure regressive. And it does so in a way to where those who can only work 40 hours then would have to pay more of the tax burden, like parents, for instance, who can't work overtime because they have children would then be paying more in taxes. So those who can work 60 hours can have this kind of regressive structure to where they're paying less, even though they're making more, right? So like lower earners at the end of the day are then paying more in taxes. Nor did he ever actually explain how he would implement or fund these things. So they're not policies, they're just talking points of that. Like you have to explain how they're going to be implemented, how they're going to be funded. That's how something becomes a policy. He ran on tariffs, which is harmful to consumers. We know this through historical presidents, through any economist who wants to talk on tariffs. And he instead focused on cultural issues and lying about Democrats, so they had to defend themselves rather than attack him. We know for a fact that his voters disproportionately believed in objectively false things. So to say that he got a mandate for the economy is silly, especially when it's just a mandate for whatever they want to say in that moment. Like they mandated this and they mandated this and this. And it's like, no, a lot of people bought into your lies and other people just bought off the economic vibe.
I think that it's funny you said you were expecting a far left meltdown and you quoted some 22-year-old actress from Hollywood, but you refused to admit or you refused to acknowledge that the former president, the president-elect, refused to concede the last election. He hasn't conceded it to this day. After that election, he made up lies about widespread election fraud, and people stormed the Capitol. So the idea that the far left is melting down because some 22-year-old actress said some cringy, corny thing on Instagram is totally absurd. You're ignoring Donald Trump's insane apocalyptic rhetoric, but I do want to respond to what Evan said. Evan said something to the effect of Donald Trump ran on actual economic policies. Yeah, all of his policies regarding the economy, beyond just the rhetoric about no tax on tips, His main economic proposal is a 20% blanket tariff on all imports in the United States. If you think prices went up over the past 4 years, wait until that happens. You also said Gen Z voted due to all the wars across the globe, the proxy wars. I mean, foreign policy was on the last concern of Gen Zers, and most Gen Zers are probably pro-Ukraine. That's not a proxy war. That's us defending their sovereignty.
This is another interesting point that I'm glad was tackled here, because like the right will post clips of random ostensibly left-leaning, these blue-haired young kids that I guess are liberals. They're like crying or upset online because Trump won, or like quotes from a celebrity like they are in this clip, right, who is upset. And they'll be like, look at the left losing their mind. The left is raging because they lost. Or like in my post, right, like on my videos and stuff, people will comment that I'm sad, or I have somebody from my town that's like posting my videos on Facebook and it's like, he's ready to cry, and all this just absolute nonsense, especially when considering just 4 years ago, we saw the right lose, and it resulted in them violently storming the Capitol with weapons, trying to hang the sitting vice president because he wouldn't certify Trump fraudulently, attacking police officers, doing hundreds of millions of dollars in damage, opening 60 court cases and shooting 0% from the field in those court cases, and then whining about it for the next 4 years, pretending that they are victimized and oppressed in this country because of it, just to now pretend that none of that ever happened because they won. So of course it was a free and fair election and rigging can't happen. So we aren't even in the same league in terms of the left and the right when it comes to loss reactions to losing. And then that's just first and foremost. And then second, like Adam said, just wait until the effects of tariffs on prices sets in. If Trump is even able to do them to that respect, I mean, it might be just another campaign lie. Who knows? We never got the border. We never got a replacement to Obamacare. We never got any of the things he promised his last administration. So probably not going to happen. But if it does, it'll be funny, because then we'll have this kind of thought experiment, this case study right before our eyes, if you will, of MAGA blaming inflation on Biden when it's clearly not caused by him, when it's clearly a global issue, when clearly every country had a similar kind of a spike in terms of their inflation and their CPI. And Biden actually led to us rebounding from that stronger than any other country. Still his fault. But then they're going to have to turn around and defend prices rising under Trump, even though they will actually be directly caused by one of Trump's policies in terms of his tariffs. I mean, they'll probably try to pin it on Biden, like, oh, these are the leftover effects of the Biden economy. And to that note, I give it maybe 60 days max, maybe 90 days, somewhere in there max, of Trump being in office before they start touting things in the economy that are clearly from Biden. They'll be like, look at inflation, look at the GDP, look at this, all these things from Biden. I guarantee it'll come within 60 days of Trump being in office, like they always do, where Republicans create recessions for Democrats to come and have to clean up, so the Republicans can then come back in office and take credit for it because they control media narratives in this country. That is just sadly how it goes.